Hey, Craig, good to see you again.
Hey,
How you
Matt.
doing?
Yeah. Good.
Good. I think today we're going to talk about something that is near and dear to both of us. And I think we talk a lot about this a lot amongst ourselves. I think other people may be interested. The world of people call it like science-based bodybuilding or evidence-based bodybuilding research, all those kind of things.
So that's actual science, not bro science.
Yeah, actually, yeah. According to those who do report
Yeah,
the
sure.
science. I will start off with a bit of a disclaimer here. I'm not going to talk about this to attack anybody or go after anybody because I do love research. The more research is better.
Mm-hmm.
I just think some people out there would benefit from understanding that the best research laboratory in the world is probably the gyms around the world and all the experts who have done the work and logged the results. Very importantly, logged the results. We can talk on that more, but you simply can't duplicate that in a lab, and you certainly can't duplicate it with limited subjects with little to no experience in weight training on a short time span. So I'll open just by touching one particular study that was published fairly recently. It was about split or full body workout routines, which is better for hypertrophy. Hypertrophy is near and dear to us. You know, there's lots of kind of workouts out there, but hypertrophy is all about for us. This was by Evangelista et al. And it's a good read. I mean, it's not a bad study in any way, but it just touches some of the things that I think we can expand on about what's optimal, what's not optimal, about taking these studies to heart, maybe too much, and what we can do for people about that. So in this study itself, they had 67 people, and they compared them on split or full body workout routines, equated for volume. And perhaps most importantly to us and other bodybuilders listening, these are untrained subjects. And it was for a relatively short time. I'm not exactly sure, but I think it was for, it wasn't months and certainly wasn't years. And I think we also know, we'll just say right here, it takes years to develop a quality physique, right?
Yep.
Conversely, take untrained subjects and have them do anything and they will grow, right? So it's very difficult to say which is better or worse when everything is responsive to a naive trainee. And I think these are just some of the things that you can take a look at a very interesting research paper. And this is just an example that looks good. It sounds good. It goes after the things we're interested in. Like what's the best split for hypertrophy? We want to know that as bodybuilders, even though we are doing our experiments every day, we still like to see research, but this stuff falls flat a bit. And I think the problem today is there are people out there who are purporting themselves as bodybuilding experts or hypertrophy experts using these research studies as their backing for their opinion. And many times these people haven't actually done the work themselves either. Never mind the scientists aren't familiar. The people purporting to know, and this is why I know, obviously have not been, bodybuilding at a high level for a long time. And us as bodybuilders, we're talking about what's optimal for us. It's optimal hypertrophy. So, this study, as again, I already quoted, people can look it up. It's just an example of what's right and wrong about this stuff. And I just, I know you have opinions on this, so I just kind of viewing the topic up like that. And let's get into it. What do you think about these kind of studies and these kind of people? Not the science researcher, but the people who use this as a backing for their claims for knowing everything.
Sure. So, I mean, that's certainly a very, popular topic or popular marketing approach these days is trying to use, scientific backed approaches to bodybuilding, et cetera, et cetera. The issue that I think that the fundamental issue behind that approach is that in something like bodybuilding, science always lags practice.
Yeah.
And that's, for some reason, we have no problem accepting that in, for example, my other job, which is working in finance, in financial derivatives, right? We all pretty much accept that the actual practitioners are going to be miles ahead of the academics that are studying it and doing the academic studies on it. So it's quite strange. Like, we're not talking about, oh, sorry about that. We're not talking about particle physics or chemical synthesis or something like that. So in that respect, it's not quite the same. Like, we're not going to have cutting edge research when it comes to bodybuilding, because most of the stuff is mainly about application of stuff that we already know. because it's about application of stuff that we already know. Obviously, the more anecdotal evidence that we have allows us to make more informed decisions.
Mm.
In addition to that, of course, you have the concept of individual variation as well. So everyone has different genetics. People have different lifestyles, et cetera, et cetera. What might be the best approach for one person is not necessarily the best approach for the other person.
Absolutely.
So where science is really, really useful is coming up with a base for the very, very starting point of things. And one thing that I would like to sort of, give a hat tip to the research that's coming out recently is that at least I've noticed that I would say in probably the last 5 years or so, I've noticed that the tone of the research has kind of changed, and it's no longer about disproving what the bros have learned in the field, but it's more about, I would almost say proving that what the bros have deduced.
Yeah, they're seeking to validate or not. It seems.
So it seems to be more about validation of established practice. As opposed to these guys are a bunch of idiot meatheads, right? Which was kind of the approach maybe 15 years ago in the early days of the internet. I remember when I was looking for, diet information and stuff like that. And at the time, the science had said, and this was, I would say probably 15 years ago, it was about 2008, something like that. The science at the time said that 0.8 grams per kilogram was the optimal for protein consumption.
Right.
So that's like really, really low.
That stood for a long time.
Yeah, it did. And that was actually done, I think it was like sedentary elderly people is where that snippet came from. So again, that's sort of that, yes, it's maybe applicable to the general population or for people that aren't training, but not, certainly not applicable to a bodybuilder that's training 5 times a week and trying to walk around with more muscle mass than his body or her body wants to carry naturally.
Right.
So completely different, misapplication of the conclusion.
Yeah.
So, I think there's just like so much of that. But that said, I mean, there are like some really, really good researchers out there now. Like Brad Schoenfeld, Scott Stevenson. I think Mike Israetel also does some as well. But
Alan Aragon is good too. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. But these are guys that have like they've got they're involved in the game quite deeply, right? In terms of very, very working intimately with the bodybuilding community to try to come up with interesting studies that are actually relevant.
Right. Yeah. I think myself always having read studies for decades and decades. I remember being in university, UMass Boston, back in the 1990s, and to read journals, if it wasn't on the shelf, you had to go to microfiche.
Oh yes.
And I used to go to microfiche and read old research subjects, because I wanted to see the research, but the problem always was, and still remains somewhat, that it was never on people like me. And I think you hinted on that, but I think that's extremely important when you look at these studies. People who already have years of experience, who've tried numerous different techniques, who are at an advanced level, whose bodies require an extreme level of stimulation to keep going beyond where they already are, even to maintain where they are. And then you come up with a study where you have untrained subjects given sometimes advanced bodybuilding techniques like split routines or drop sets or rep pause. I mean, of course they're going to grow, but that's also, unfortunately it's not relevant to us in that it doesn't really give us new information, which for me is disappointing because I always want new information.
Of course.
I want to learn more. I'd love to see the research validate what I already know, not because I'm seeking confirmation bias, but because I'd like to know that I'm not doing the wrong thing.
Indeed. Yeah. I mean, that's like, if we look, like you touched upon, like the value of experience and learning from people with experience. Like if we consider, so like just to give people an idea of the breadth of the body of knowledge that's contained within bodybuilding and within the bodybuilding community. If you figure that, say you have a show every weekend for like 30 weeks of the year, right? So, that's just over half the year. So that's probably conservative. But if you figure that a season runs from, I don't know, say May to November, that might kind of be about accurate. And say that, and we'll just talk about bodybuilding. Let's say there's 10 bodybuilders a show. In total, that's 300 bodybuilders, which means that's 300 data points in one season. And bodybuilding's been going on for decades.
Yeah.
Right? If you consider, so like just the sheer number, and then like, of course, throw in men's physique. And men's physique, every show's got like 150 competitors. So, I mean, you want to talk about data.
Yeah.
Not enough there, right?
Yeah.
So if you, of course, I do recognize that there are people that do multiple shows and stuff like that, but still, like you get the point that I'm trying to make. Is that like there's so many different data points that can be observed in any given season, and that's just like, I'm just talking about like sort of the smaller shows here in Japan, right? I'm not talking about like these massive shows in the US and all that kind of thing, right? So and you consider that that's global, and then if you were to consider sort of the top coaches that are out there, the top coaches have, I've heard anywhere from like 40 to, at the high end, like 100 clients. And so if they have 40 to 100 clients every year and they're prepping all of them, then by the time that they get through 5 seasons, we're talking about like hundreds of data points that these guys have. And these coaches, because they're top coaches, are recording everything, logging everything, drawing upon previous experience, et cetera, and really coming up with what is actually optimal in terms of practice. So I would suggest, rather than trying to learn from reading research on your own, which is a very, it's an important thing to do, don't get me wrong, but you can learn a lot more from working with a good coach who has learned from good coaches, who has experienced themselves, et cetera, then you can. It's much the same as, like, I don't know, trying to teach yourself to drive by reading a book on it. Like, you can't learn how to drive a car by reading the owner's manual of your car. Right. So it's kind of the same thing there. Like, there's a bit more involved. Well, there's much more involved in that.
Yeah. I think a big part of that, which maybe gets overlooked, but you did touch on, of course, is the fact that, for decades, I mean, I've been doing this since the 1980s, right? The majority of that time, there were no coaches. Coaches is a relatively new thing. And before that, for the most part, most people were on their own. And not everybody documented everything. It wasn't like everybody was Dorian Yates who logged everything they did, everything they ate. People didn't do that. So a lot of it was kind of winging it, but it was kind of like the common knowledge, that the zeitgeist. The gym, people knew how to train, basically how to diet, because everybody was doing it. You just kind of knew almost by instinct. So when people talk about bro science, I think they mistakenly might be talking about that kind of model, as opposed to what you talked about, where you have coaches who record, log, and document everything in their clients. And while they're not sharing that to everybody en masse, of course, because that would be, foolish for a coach to do, frankly, it is, it's kept as a record, like you say, and it is refined upon. It is a body of knowledge that is greater than anything we're going to get in any kind of research paper, because it does have controls to a sense.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what a prep is all about, right? It's all about controlling all the variables that are involved. It's about controlling cardio, training, diet, supplementation, PEDs, et cetera, like, that's all controlled, and those variables that you're controlling, you then manipulate to achieve your desired outcome. So it's actually a very scientific process. And I think that that's why the best coaches out there, these are guys that are keeping the records, that have massive Excel spreadsheets of data and things like that they're working through. And I also think that in this day and age, coaches talk to one another. And on top of that, because you have clients going from one coach to another coach, there's always a compare and contrast that's done with, approaches that they've used in the past, et cetera. So everyone kind of knows pretty much what other people are doing. And as such, I think that, and then also with the internet and things being shared on the internet, I think that now there is indeed a concept of best practice. And I think that we have achieved that in bodybuilding, and I'm quite sure that we could if we sat down and wrote it out, we could come up with, best practice for, competing, whether it's like approaches to prep, et cetera, et cetera. In fact, I know that I think it was Scott Stevenson and a couple other researchers had put together recommendations for contest prep in an actual like journal. Right?
Yeah, I think he and Schoenfeld, I think they did an actual research study on prep, which was amazing.
2 years ago it came out.
Yeah.
So, and that was actually like, I remember seeing the solicitation for input from bodybuilders, right? So like, because I think it was on Reddit or something. They were trying to get people to respond and such. Not that Reddit is necessarily the best place to find the top bodybuilders, but I'm quite surprised. Like a bit of a segue there, but on Reddit there are guys, like I saw Terrence Ruffin posting on there.
Yeah.
There are guys that are active, right? Especially
in
the younger generation. So dating myself there. But so I think that that combination of like, I think that the modern iteration of bro science is much more scientific perhaps than it may have been in the days that you're talking about. I like, my first exposure to prep and everything was already in the internet era, really. So like, I had seen the first time that I saw anything written out about prep and like properly prepping was on John Meadows' website on Mountain where he had like put, and that was the thing that was so valuable to me, is he'd put up like pictures of his client, like what changes they made to the diet. Of course, there was some information that was left out, but that's like, but still, it was just
basics for that.
It's still just a gold mine to see. To see that sort of thing,
and that's pretty much valid research right there.
Absolutely,
right? Applied. That's one of the things. Like you say, like you got into it when the internet was there. I got into it long before the internet was there. We didn't have it. So when I kind of got back into bodybuilding more seriously, I guess I never stopped. But when I moved to Japan in 2007, I wanted to find a good gym. I found a good gym. Fortunately, got back into bodybuilding. I found good forms like Professional Muscle is one of the first forms at that time. And that's where I discovered Dante Trudell's dog crap training, DC training, which I fell in love with. It's my favorite kind of training, right? But he was, for the first time in my memory, a documented training system by someone who's worked with very high level professional bodybuilders. And every step was kind of written out for you, how to train, how to rotate, how to progress, your food, everything. That was just something that didn't exist before. And again, like I say, like when people think about bro science, they tend to think about a bunch of lunkheads wandering around the gym, picking up weights, putting them down, not knowing what they're doing. And it really hasn't been like that for a very long time. And I think, it'd be great if someday a lot of the coaches out there could share their information, maybe, after they retire from the business, they don't want to, hold their cards close to the chest or whatever, to get it out there to increase the body of knowledge. I think that would be, a really fantastic thing to do. And I think that, or maybe even working with some of the researchers out there that some of those you talked about who are hooked into this world,
I think, looking at the, at that competition prep research paper that they put out. I mean, that's very, very close to what I've seen in prep each time. I think that there's many ways to skin a cat. So for example, like, do you taper water or do you water load, right? In order to achieve that really dry look, like what's better? Do you fat load or not? Do you carb load or not, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that there's many ways to skin a cat. And I think that that's kind of where a coach can show his skill or her skill.
Right.
It's that bringing in their client with the look that they're looking to achieve. So that's where I think that's where the real art, and that's where of course you have to go through the entire process to get the person prepared for whatever happens at the end. But and I don't think that that peak week necessarily needs to be something very strange. You could indeed just run everything straight into the show. It depends on where you are at that point. And whether deploying those techniques like water loading or, I mean, guys back in the day used to control sodium, potassium, all that kind of stuff. Like, if that's worth it or not. Right. So, and I think that comes down to the coach's judgment. probably one of the many things that you're paying for when you work with a coach.
Yeah, you would hope so. Yeah, and well, I think like this case of the paper written on peak week, I think that might have been what was called was peak week research, was a great example of what we'd like to see. It also shows just how hard it is to get real research on something like this.
Absolutely.
I mean, because the people have to be already at a high level. They have to be already extremely experienced. They have to already be doing, pushing the envelope in every aspect to get the results they desire. And that's not the kind of things you're going to find from a general group of subjects in a research study.
You raise an excellent point there, because like I've always thought, say for example, you want to run a scientifically controlled study on preparation. Do you want to be a subject for that? Do you want to be the guy that's trying something weird heading into a bodybuilding show?
Right.
Or trying something different?
Yeah.
Probably not.
Right.
Right. We have a bunch of researchers that come up and say, okay, you're going to be in the carb loading group, and then the other guy is going to be in the fat loading group. Like, hey, what if I lose?
Exactly.
Right? After dieting my ass off for 16 weeks, like,
I
don't know if I want to do that. Right.
Right. Yeah.
So, I think that in and of itself makes that sort of research very, very difficult. And then if you throw in the whole question about PEDs and stuff, then, that raises ethical questions and legal questions in some countries, right? Like, and it's just like, again, that's a highly individualized thing as well, where people will respond differently to different compounds, blah, blah, blah. So, it makes, so I think that, even though we all have that desire for very standardized, structured research, that in actual fact, it's very, very difficult to be able to achieve that. Because, if somebody said to me, like, hey, you're in experimental group A and we want you to do this, I'd be like, no thanks.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I have a show to win. Thank you very much.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah.
I'm not dieting 16 weeks for fun. Well, I am, but
or possibly some kind of outcome to satisfy the research.
Exactly.
Yeah. And like conversely, like, you mentioned obviously EDs, if we take that out of the picture and even just look at a standard contest prep of like 12 to 20 weeks, that's a grueling, miserable process. You will not get people to do that for the sake of research unless they're like gonna possibly win at the end, right?
Yeah.
You're not gonna get a bunch of people, even untrained people, which is usually, and I don't care how much you pay them, they're not gonna diet for 20 weeks. And miserable and suffering all that time.
You're not going to get an average person to put up with the suffering.
Right. It's not going to happen. Right.
You can't pick any Joe off.
Yeah. And a bodybuilder who's serious wouldn't do that either, because it ruined his whole season.
Yep.
So
not only that, but like, what if, say, for example, you're doing sticking with the nutrition side, you have a low protein group and a high protein group.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
On prep, like a low protein group in prep that scares me so bad, because you would wind up I'd wind up being, especially with my metabolism, I'd wind up being 115 pounds on stage.
Cool.
Where did all my muscle go?
Yeah. So even, if you go away from prep, something less volatile, like just training, just trying to gain muscle. Talking about the training, like my favorite training, like dog crap, rest pause, it's very, very hard. You're not going to get someone to do that for 3 to 6 months by the book, because it's going to be painful. It's going to be unpleasant. It's going to be tiring. No one's going to do that. So you're not going to be able to capture that research, unfortunately.
Well, also, and I think the thing that's really interesting here is, I know that you're a big proponent of dog crap, but for me, that doesn't work very well.
Right. So would you want to be in a program and say you have to do this 6 months?
So, I've tried it, and I know that because I've tried it, that it doesn't work that well
for you. Yeah.
But that's like, and again, that probably has to do with our different genetics, right? Because you have the type of genetics that respond to that. Whereas for me, it's much more about, I have to make sure that I'm on muscle, and I have to make sure that I'm not allowing muscles that I'm not trying to target taking over the weight, basically. So
I don't do that. Don't worry. That's what I think. That's another discussion too, about like, even just this discussion right here about dog crap, different ways to look at the kind of training. How would you be able to explain it to somebody who didn't understand training?
Yeah.
Like train with maximal intensity, rest, pause twice, go to failure and beyond.
Yeah.
But don't let any ancillary muscles come in and affect the primary muscle, target muscle.
Yeah.
That would be incredibly difficult to get someone to understand. And the people who already understand that probably wouldn't be able to give you valid results for the experiment because they're already at that level. They're already done, you know? So it's I don't want to call it frustrating, but maybe disappointing to know there never will be the research we'd like to see in print. It just will never happen.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you consider that bodybuilding has got literally, like, even if the sort of actually getting it out in written form is something that's relatively new with professional muscle, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
You know, Reddit, et cetera. Even if it's relatively new in that respect, at the end of the day, these techniques have sort of been tried and tested over decades.
Right.
So we're literally drawing upon decades of research,
Mm-hmm.
you know, in that respect. And this sort of decades of established practice. So in order to replicate that, I would expect that it would also take decades to do.
Yeah.
In terms of, and there's just, bodybuilding has so many different facets to it as well. It has the nutrition dimension, and even in nutrition alone, I could think of hundreds of studies that need to be done.
Yeah.
In training, it's the same thing, you know.
Recovery techniques and all the
techniques, and just like what exercise is superior to what, blah, blah, you know. And then again, you could get into the genetics part of it. You could get into, it could be, you know, so like if you wanted to take, say, somebody who's got short torso and long limbs versus somebody that's got long torso and short limbs, like how do they need, obviously those two type of people can't train the same way. Right. Yeah. So what's optimal in which case? Yeah. And then there's, you know, supplementation, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, there's just so many studies that would have to be done. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, and we know that because we've done this for so long, right? And so I think that in contrast, like we started at the beginning of this saying, there's a lot of people out there right now who are putting themselves as advocates for knowledge, you know, with the science-based coaching or training or whatever like that, who clearly haven't been in the trenches for decades themselves. So they don't really know. And it's like, not to sound too harsh, but to me, it's like an argument from authority fallacy.
Indeed.
Stunning, right?
Exactly what it is.
You know, and they're using somebody else's authority as well, not even their own. They're saying, you know,
indeed,
this study over here says this, and it's a study, so you should listen to it. Game over. And therefore you should pay for my services. You know, which I think gives us both a bit of a sour taste in the mouth, you know.
Indeed.
Definitely. Yeah.
And especially when, you know, I've seen a number of these guys who will never post a client picture.
Which is curious.
Particularly look very like they're practitioners themselves. Right. So, you know, it just, it's that whole, as you said, appeal to authority fallacy where who gives you the right to say this? Because you've read a bunch of stuff, like
which anybody else could do. And even let's say, even if the knowledge was valid, it was the best research, then going to actually applying it, actualizing it with a client is a whole different level, you know. And these people, from what I've seen, for the most part, don't have that experience to be able to translate that into actual results either, even if it was correct in the first place.
Well, not only that, but often the type of people that are strongest at researching are not necessarily the type of people who will be able to get the best out of their clients either. So it's they're two different skill sets, really. You know, there's the, like, a good coach will motivate you and inspire you and get you through the hard times and celebrate the good times with you, etc. They're not just looking at the numbers in the spreadsheet and, you know, or the quoting the last PubMed study, right? So
right.
There's a bit of a human dimension in there too that needs to be considered as well.
Yeah, I don't think there's any researcher like the ones we've quoted, the Scott Stevensons of the Bradshaw. I mean, Scott's probably could be a good coach, but you know, Alan Algo, they wouldn't call themselves great coaches. That's not their strong suit.
That's not their bag. Yeah. But that's why I respect those guys so much, because they stay in their lane and they are genuinely interested in the research and genuinely do a very good job of it. But do not try to pitch themselves as something they're not. Like I don't see any, Brad Schoenfeld coaching services anywhere.
No, yeah, he wouldn't do that. That'd be unethical, and
yeah, that's just proper integrity in my mind.
Right. And so we have those people, we see them on Instagram and stuff come in there. They are trying to shim themselves into that niche they're making of being in a science-based, trainer or whatever. And it's intellectually dishonest.
Yep.
If nothing else. I could say worse things about it than that, but that's
well, no, we'll keep it clean.
keep it clean. Yeah. But I think anybody can benefit by reading the research, but just keep in mind, of course, the best lab out there is the people in the trenches who've done this for decades.
Indeed.
Try out different things for yourself. Whatever works for you. Because like, as you said, Craig, we all have different genetics. Like you said, one technique works great for me training, doesn't work well for you. That doesn't mean it's good or bad. It's just, we're just different people. And everybody don't go and do something, look at a study and see that contradicts what you're doing. So abandon what you're doing. Because some people, if they weigh too heavily on this and they listen too much to the people we talked about, those charlatans or whatever, they may become discouraged in the course that they're on, even though it's successful, because authority says it's not.
Time too, right? So
right, yeah. So
it's been 12 weeks. Why aren't I jacked?
yeah. You look at these studies,
I did full body 3 times a day for 12 weeks. Like
3
times a week for 12 weeks. Why am I not jacked?
That could cause a lot of disappointment in people. I genuinely hate to see that. I want people to feel good and have confidence and be able to improve themselves. And sometimes being given the answers, quote unquote, will be counterproductive in that quest.
Yeah, indeed. Well, I mean, and that brings into the whole like fitness journey concept, right? Like, it's a bodybuilding journey, it's a fitness journey. It's like you have to try stuff out and try it. And if you have a good coach, then they will know different approaches work better for different people, and with respect to some things, and will be able to differentiate what might work better for you as a client as opposed to someone else. So again, that's of course I'm very biased, but I just really think that a lot of the very best quality knowledge that I have managed to gain has not been from reading research. It's been from reading research concurrently with being coached by some very talented people. So,
right. And acknowledging the fact that people in the trenches are doing research.
Exactly.
And since it's being documented and shared and circulated, it's as good as we're going to get, I think. And there's nothing wrong with that, I think. Yeah. So I guess we can talk about this for a long time. Try not to.
We wrap it up so we don't rattle.
Yeah. I think we made our point for people. It's take everything with a grain of salt. Don't give anybody more credit than they deserve, especially if they're talking about somebody else's information. And to be honest, like it's not always the case, because there's plenty of pro level trainers who don't look amazing. But in that case, they better have a good portfolio of clients to look at to see if what they're talking about is actually justified. Well,
I mean, classic case is James Iotti. What's Team Atlas MTL, right?
Team Atlas MTL, okay.
Yeah. So he does a lot of top level bikini competitors.
Yeah.
I guarantee you, he's probably never done a bikini show himself. He's a very good coach for I'm not going to say he's a very good coach, because I don't know, there's controversy and all that kind of stuff, but he's certainly been very talented in terms of producing some very top level competitors.
Right. Yeah. And then you have the portfolio to look at to know what they're talking about, and the body of research in a way. Exactly. That's what that is, right? So
indeed.
Yeah. So
perfect.
Great topic. I enjoyed talking about this. We talk about it a lot on our own. Good to share it with some listeners. And I think maybe we'll wrap it up for now on this one.
Sounds good to me.
I will see you again very soon.
Sounds great. Remember to like and subscribe and all that stuff.
Yes, please.
Leave comments if you have questions, or if you think we're nuts.
Yeah. Or if you want to hear more about this or that or whatever, we'd love to talk about it.
Yeah.
We've been around for a while, and I would like to share. So I'd love to hear what you want to talk about. Okay. All right. Thanks, Greg. I will see you soon.
Thanks, Matt.
Okay. Cheers. Bye.